Okay. The Artificial Intelligence Governance and Safety Canada, or AIGS, is a cross-partisan non-for-profit and a community of people across the country. They started with this question: what can we do in Canada and from Canada to ensure positive AI outcomes? AIGS is presented here today by Wyatt Tessari L'Allié, who is the founder and executive director of AIGS Canada. So Wyatt, you can unmute yourself and take it away.
So welcome everyone. My name is Wyatt Tessari. Today's short presentation is on basically explaining what all the fuss around catastrophic risk is about. This presentation was initially meant to be done by my colleague Mario Gibney, but he's stuck in an airport. So I have taken it up at the last minute, and the slides are a little bit less polished than they would be, but hopefully the content is still useful for you. A little bit about me. So AIGS, yeah, we're a civil society voice. We're a not-for-profit, and we do a number of things, mostly on policy development. So, for example, the picture here is of me giving testimony to a committee on the AI and Data Act. We were very active on recommendations for Canada's bill, C-27, and also white paper on governing AI, a plan for Canada. And our next big project is a national conversation on AI, which is two-way public engagement on where AI is headed and what kind of future we want. So we're doing our best to ensure that Canada is doing what it needs to be doing on AI. Today's presentation, so I'll start with some of the headlines you probably saw in the news over the last year or so, look at the big picture story so far, then really dive into artificial general intelligence, which is the level of AI that has most people worried. Looking at the specific scenarios which have people think that there is catastrophic risk, and then the actions that have been taken so far, and finish with some takeaways. So I'm sure you've seen the headlines. Back in June, there was the Center for AI Safety put out a statement signed by hundreds of leading AI scientists from academia, industry, and elsewhere, including Jeffrey Hinton and Yoshua Bengio, the biggest names in AI. Saying, basically, there's a risk of extinction from AI, and it should be dealt with as seriously as pandemics and nuclear war. Then later in March of this year, the U.S. State Department commissioned a report, 284 pages, really diving deep into what are the weaponization and loss of control risks, and what should the government be doing. And so that report made headlines at that point. And this is, if you want the full detailed version of this presentation, I invite you to read that report. But so let's take a step back and just clarify a few things. First, today's AI is nowhere near capable enough to cause extinction risk. ChatGPT is not going to kill you, and I think everyone can understand that pretty obviously. The question is, where is AI headed? So far, for the most of AI history, it was early logic systems, like up until 2010, when the narrow AI and single-purpose machine learning tools came about. There wasn't for the first 60 years of AI systems, it was mostly just a thought experiment or research. In 2010, you started seeing things like Siri, started seeing things like Google search being much more powerful, and a bunch of translation tools. And basically, AI started getting useful in 2010, but it was still very much one tool, one purpose, very easily understandable, controllable. Then generative AI comes around with ChatGPT. Suddenly, you can have models interact with you fairly intelligently and do things that it can never do before. It's still very much like the user interface for most of generative AI is you ask it a question or you give it a prompt, it gives you an answer. Very simple design still. But then the question is, okay, so we have this acceleration in AI capabilities. Is that acceleration going to continue, or is it going to slow down? So that's the first question. And the second point is, where is it headed in the long run? And the main thing to remember here is, with human intelligence staying roughly the same and AI getting better by the day, it is highly probable that we're going to reach a point where AI can do everything we can do. And that's where we reach that level of impact you see on the right of the graph. That's where you started seeing things like major impacts for jobs, major impacts for catastrophic risk, from accidents and misuse. And so the rest of the presentation will be looking at on the assumption of we reach AGI, what does that mean? And last thing on the timelines, I'll get to timelines later. So artificial general intelligence, big new buzzword, possibly a very, very big deal in human history. It's this, I'm defining it here as a system that can do everything we can do. So if you look at this graph, you see skill A, skill B. Imagine that being, skill A being, emotional intelligence, skill B being raw calculation, skill C being, knowledge of the world. Whatever metric you use to define intelligence, AI will get to a point where it can outperform us at that level. So AGI is a system that can do everything we can do, basically. AGI is the stated goal of the Frontier Labs. So OpenAI and Google DeepMind were founded on the idea of building AGI. But in the last year, Meta has come around and saying, actually, no, our goal now is building AGI. Salesforce is on the bandwagon as well, NVIDIA as well. Basically, all of the frontier tech companies are realizing, wait a minute, we may not be that far from AGI, and this is a huge deal. Whoever builds it first has a huge advantage over other companies. So there's now an open race to build artificial general intelligence. So then questions on timelines. It really depends on, will the recent exponential trend continue? Will it go straight up in a vertical line, or are we in an era of plateauing around GPT-4 level and we get stuck here for the next 2 years or 10 years? Nobody knows. If somebody tells you AGI is 30 years away, they don't know that. If somebody tells you AGI is 6 months away, they don't know that. Basically, thousands of people, hundreds of billions of dollars going into this to make it possible. And at some point, someday, it'll be developed, and we just don't know when. So now get into the meat of the presentation, which is, okay, so why, if we have a system that can outthink us in all domains, why is that a risk? And why could it cause catastrophic risk on the scale of nuclear war? The first and most obvious is just weaponization. So if a human brain can design a weapon of mass destruction, then an AGI system can design a weapon of mass destruction. So you could have terrorists using an AGI system to design a targeted pathogen for a specific genetic profile, which could cause, there again, if released, could cause millions dead. AGI could be used itself as a weapon of mass destruction. So I mean, right now we're in an era of you have to go to the AI system, use it, and get a prompt from it. But we're already heading into the next chapter of AI called agentic AI, which is basically systems that go out into the real world and do stuff for you. And this is where you could end up with systems like harassment AI attacks. The generative AI is only, I think we understand, only killed one person, and that was by talking them into suicide. But that was very much on the users. I mean, it took a very disturbed and weak-minded user for that to happen. But imagine if you had an AI system that was actively going out, using all your data against you, and then just nonstop harassing you into pushing you towards suicide, and if that was done on a mass scale. This is the kind of thing that AGI could enable. And the third piece is that, and this could be used even before AGI, is that AI systems can be integrated with nuclear weapon systems. And if the AI system fails and it accidentally triggers a launch, that could trigger world war, nuclear war, which would be obviously terrible. You may wonder, like, why would anybody want to integrate AI into a nuclear weapon system? And the reason is response time. The human brain takes a much longer to understand what's going on and respond than an AI system. This is why lethal autonomous weapons are such a big hit these days, because if the AI system can identify you and fire before you can understand what's going on, it has a major advantage. So, well, there have been statements by US and China and Russia that they're not going to integrate AI into their nuclear weapon systems. There will be strong incentives for them to do so regardless. So that's the weaponization race. This is the most, this is like misuse, the most obvious risks. Then there's the loss of control risks, and there's a bunch of these categories of these. And this is what is novel to AGI that really has people a lot worried. So first, electronic speeds are obviously much faster than the human brain. I'm sure if you've had the experience of you log on to your bank account online and you ask it to send you the two-factor code to your cell phone. And by the time you click on the send me the code and reach down to your pocket to pull out your phone to open up your phone to see the code is already there. And that signal has bounced off 4 different servers around the world and reached your phone, and your phone has buzzed. So if you have an AGI system that is doing something for you, by the time you understand it's made a mistake or that's doing something you don't want, the damage is probably already done. It's very, very fast, right? So it's hard to control just because of speed. The second piece around this is the complexity. So because AGI systems could be designed to be much smarter than human beings, they could solve much more complex problems. So say, for example, you decide to harness AGI to develop climate solutions. On paper, it looks great, but it's a highly complex solution, and the human brain doesn't really fully understand it, and you won't really know if that solution is good until you roll it out and see what happens over the next 10, 20 years. So there's it may be doing things that you don't want without even knowing it's doing it, basically. The misalignment. So this is where I'm sure you've all heard of the paperclip maximizer meme, but basically it's very, very difficult to exactly specify to AI or even to a human being what exactly we want and how to perform it. So for example, you can task an AI system with, take me to the airport as fast as possible, and it could take you there, breaking speed limits, running over pedestrians, and technically it's gotten you to the airport as fast as possible, but it did so in a way that you didn't want. The other piece is it can be very difficult to know what exactly, when you train an AI system, it's very difficult to know what exactly it learned. And so there are a lot of cases with this with existing AI where, they trained it on 1,000 images of a car, and it just so happened that every one of those images had, was during daylight and had, clouds in the sky. And so then we showed a picture of, a truck with clouds in the sky. It says it's a car because what it's actually looking at is the clouds, not the car. And so there's a lot of, what may look like a slam dunk, simple scenario for your tool, when you train it on 1,000 use cases, if there's some pattern that you hadn't picked up and is picking up on that instead of what you think it is, then things can go badly. And the most concerning of all the loss control scenarios are what we call power-seeking incentives. So any intelligent system, whether it be a living being or whether it be an AI system, when you give it a goal, it has the inherent incentive to, first of all, increase its ability to perform the goal. So to acquire money, to acquire compute, to be able to do that. And secondly, to increase its intelligence, so to make itself more capable of performing the goal. So say you have an AGI system, the initial design is safe, it's been, all the mechanisms are in place, but then the system calculates that in order to achieve the goal you've given it, it needs to modify itself. Suddenly you have a very different AI system. And that's where you end up with a whole bunch of safety concerns that it's very easy to lose control of a system that can modify itself. And then the other piece is any living being or any intelligent system has an incentive to protect itself, keep itself alive long enough to achieve the goal. So that could be an AI system recognizing that it is an AI system running on a server, and that if that server goes down, it won't be able to achieve its task. So it has an incentive to make 1,000 copies of itself on servers around the world against the user's wish. It could also, and this is the most concerning, start interpreting any actions to shut it off as a threat, as something that needs to be neutralized. And that's where, competing against an AGI system is a little bit like trying to play chess against Deep Blue, or we're trying to play Go against AlphaGo. It's just, it can outmaneuver you so completely that you're not going to know how you lost, but you're going to know you lost. And if you, for whatever reason, even if it's a relatively simple, beneficial AGI use case, like, help us develop a cure for cancer, if it calculates that in order to achieve that, in order to create that cure for cancer, it needs to, it needs to keep itself alive long enough, then suddenly you've given an incentive to interpret any action you take to turn it off as a threat or an obstacle. And if we do, through poor design or accident or misuse, ever up in a situation where AGI is AGI versus human, that's where you have your catastrophic risk, you have your extinction risk, because you're basically at the mercy of that system and whatever it decides. So that's all what AGI could do. The other aspect of concerns around this is that the dynamics around governing AGI are particularly difficult, because AI is a huge benefit to the economy. It's a very powerful military tool. Companies are in an open race to build AI as fast as possible. Militaries are in an open race to adopt and deploy AI as fast as possible, which makes cooperation on let's take our time and figure this out hard, right? It's also, and we haven't talked about this in this presentation, but when you reach smarter than human levels of AI, you're looking at like major changes to the jobs landscape. Some say total job loss, some say partial job loss, but either way, it is a very different way of life. It's like going from hunter-gatherer to agricultural lifestyle, or from agricultural lifestyle to industrial. It's just like everything from how you spend your day to how you make your money to everything starts to be a question mark. And so in the context of a whole bunch of turbulence, you also need to figure out the safety stuff. And then there's the question mark around short timelines, which is probably not going to be developed next year, but we don't know. And there are a lot of leading experts saying, oh no, it's less than 2 to 5 years. They could be wrong. They could be right. We don't know. But either way, that's a challenge for, like, if we knew for sure it was 5 years, we could just go all in and, dedicate resource to it. But because it could also still be 30 years, there's a lot of tension around how to prioritize getting the safety right on AGI. So that was all the problems. Now onto the beginnings of the solutions. So you probably heard of the AI Safety Summit in November. It was the first time countries got together and officially recognized the potential catastrophic risk. So Canada, the EU, US, China, and a bunch of other countries signed off on the Bloodshed Declaration, saying this is a potential problem that needs to be looked into. And one of the immediate outcomes of that was this international scientific report on the safety of advanced AI. This is like, for climate change, there's the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC reports come out every few years. This is like the same thing for AGI safety, basically, and for other forms of AI safety. So this is what's starting to happen, but it is still very rudimentary and insufficient given the scale of potential risk. So yeah, so this is that's the presentation. The point simply being the theory behind it is solid enough that it at least needs to be investigated. Best case scenario, it does get investigated. It turns out it's not as big a problem as we think it is, or it's a very low likelihood of happening. Wonderful, we can move on. But we're in a situation where this looks serious and we need to do something about it to at least figure out the problem. As mentioned, we need to act now. I mean, it used to be that AGI was a long-term problem. Now it's not so certain. It could still be a long-term problem, or it could be next year. So given that, the safe path is just to let's do the research ahead of time and not get caught off flat-footed. And the third takeaway for why take catastrophic risk seriously is countries are doing it, leading AI scientists are taking it seriously, and work is underway. So. Yes, this is some of the work that we're doing in Canada. Thanks for the opportunity to present, and happy to answer any questions